Welcome to Luke21 Radio, a broadcast explaining biblical prophecy in the tradition of St. Augustine. And now, from Greenville, South Carolina, here's your host, Steve Wood.
Hello, this is Steve Wood, and welcome to Luke21, and we're right in the middle of the book of Revelation. Today we're going to go into chapter 13, at least the first part of it, and today we're talking about the beast as the Great Monarch. But remember, before we begin, that the chapter numbers to the New Testament were not added until the 13th century. And so when you come to certain places in Scripture, it's really important to remember that because there's a flow between the two chapters. And as we come to chapter 13, it's almost a self-conscious connection because chapter 12 ends with just a hint of this beast that's about to arise from the sea. So we want to connect chapter 12 with chapter 13. And just to get the overall flow, back in chapter 12, verse 17, it says the dragon was angry with the woman and went off to make war on the rest of her offspring, on those who keep the commandments of God and bear testimony to Jesus. And he stood on the sand of the sea. And so the dragon was angry. He's now standing on the sand of the sea. And now verse 1 of chapter 13, and I saw a beast rising out of the sea. So this is one of the strongest connections between chapters in the book of Revelation. So we want to keep in mind that this beast that we're going to see rising out of the sea, which I'll tell you right now, it's the Antichrist, is a result of the dragon's anger. And now I'm going to repeat something I said 2 times in our previous episode. And we're talking about the Genesis 3:15 conflict that begins at the beginning of the Bible and it extends through all of human history. And Revelation chapter 12 is showing us the woman in conflict with the dragon, with Satan. And this is something that's been going on since Genesis 3. And now here's the statement I'm going to repeat for the 3rd time. The Genesis 3:15 conflict extends through all human history until the second coming. And if you want to understand biblical prophecy, just remember, this is times 4, the Genesis 3:15 conflict extends through all human history until the second coming. Now, what's going on in chapter 13 is an increase and an intensification of the conflict that Genesis 3:15 predicted, the war of the ages, the woman and her seed versus the dragon. So now Satan's fury from chapter 12 is increasing in chapter 13, giving rise to the Antichrist. And we read in Revelation 12:12, "Rejoice then, O heaven, and you that dwell therein. But woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you in great wrath, because he knows his time is short." And knowing his time is short, he pulls out all the stops and wants to introduce the Antichrist to deceive the world. And let me just read about this beast. Revelation 13:1. "And I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads, and 10 diadems upon its horns, and a blasphemous name upon its heads. And the beast I saw was like a leopard, its feet were like a bear's, and his mouth was like a lion's." And this is a composite of fearsome beast. "And to it the dragon gave his power and his throne and great authority." Now, the beast is the Antichrist, but in our minds, at least I'll speak for my mind, a lot of times I think of the Antichrist as the kind of dead opposite of Christ. And inward, he truly is. And towards the end of his reign on earth, he truly manifests that. But in the beginning, that's not the case. I think a more accurate term for the beginning of his reign would be a pseudo-Christ, a false Christ, or an imitation Christ. And he's going to have some absolutely wonderful solutions to problems plaguing the nations of the world. I'll start with war. And just imagine with me for a moment, I'm not prophesying, but this is a potential scenario. Let's say there is a nuclear exchange. And obviously, everybody in the world who is sane doesn't want a nuclear war. And if we had a nuclear exchange, even if it was a limited one, we'd certainly want some kind of plan to keep that from happening again. Well, who is Jesus Christ? He's the Prince of Peace. So what will the Antichrist be? Remember, he's a pseudo-Christ. He'll have a worldwide peace plan to take care of the nukes. Or let's say, and this doesn't take a prophet to see, but the entire world is flooded with debt that can never be repaid. So what if we have not another depression, but the greatest depression or recession, and have financial problems throughout the world? And this pseudo-Christ, hey, he seems like a great guy. He's already given us peace after a nuclear exchange, and he's come up with some kind of solutions for people to have money. And then the third thing, and I just throw this one in because the first commentary ever written that we still have was around 200 by Hippolytus on the Antichrist. It involved food. And what if people couldn't eat? That gets real serious real quick. And what if he comes up with a way to have food for everybody in the world, adequate food? Well, you would say, hey, I'll elect him, and the whole world goes after him. Now, he's given, and to me, and hear this, when he comes, I don't think it's going to be, and I could be wrong, this is just Steve at this point, but I don't think it's going to be with bombs and terror and all that type of thing. I think it will be with applause. People will be really happy. I mean, who wants nuclear war? Who wants financial crashes? I mean, really serious ones where your currency becomes worth less. And what if we didn't have food to feed our families? This is serious stuff. Somebody solve that? I'm all for him. Let's give him the throne of the world. And it says in 13:2, that Satan, the dragon, gave him power, throne, that describes kingship, and great authority. And down in verse 7 of Revelation 13, authority was given it over every tribe and people and tongue and nation. He'll have a world order. He'll be a pseudo-Christ. Who is Jesus? The King of Kings. Jesus is the great monarch. He is the great king over all of human history. What is the Antichrist? A pseudo-Christ, and he'll have authority, power, and throne. And a huge portion of the world ends up worshiping the great monarch as God, just like the Roman emperors started getting a big head and thought they were God. And so the Antichrist will become the greatest monarch in the history of the world prior to the second coming of Christ. Now, and this is something I share with my friends in the Catholic traditional movement, but there's a very shaky notion that a great monarch is going to appear and bring a Catholic order to the entire world prior to the second coming of Christ. I just got done reading a novel by a very conservative Catholic traditionalist writing a novel about the great monarch. And, it was actually a very good book. And I thought, this book might be something to recommend on Luke 21 until I got towards the very end of the novel. And then I read this quote, and he's talking about faithful Catholics. A number of them wondered if the Antichrist and the parousia are just around the corner. He had to explain repeatedly that such speculation is not consistent in any way with either revelation or the teaching of the fathers of the church. He reinforced this point by mentioning that none of the Marian apparitions mention the Antichrist. This is a fatal blunder. because the reason we have the book of Revelation is to see that the dragon is at war with the world, but the way he's going to win authority for the Antichrist is through deception. And the deception will be an unparalleled authority given to a world king, a king of kings, a great monarch. And unless you're really schooled in Scripture first before other type notions, you're going to say, well, the parousia or the Antichrist, don't worry about that. This comes first. Well, what comes before the Antichrist, or parousia, which is the second coming of Christ, is the Antichrist, and that is the great monarch in human history. So you have to be really careful that what you get excited about isn't a great Catholic monarch, but may be an arch pseudo-monarch. Pope Benedict said in 2015, quote, and listen very carefully, we see how the power of the Antichrist is expanding, and we can only pray that the Lord will give us strong shepherds who will defend his church in this hour of need from the power of evil. See, Pope Benedict studied biblical prophecy and eschatology for 50 years, and he sees that in our day, in our generation, the power of the Antichrist already manifesting, whereas this novelist say, don't worry about that. That's after the great monarch, and if that's what you're thinking, you're liable to fall for the Antichrist, thinking you think he's a Catholic hero. And you say, well, why didn't John just come out and say that, the beast was the Antichrist so that novelist could get things straight? Well, John's already exiled to Patmos, and back in the day, that was just one step below getting your head cut off. And then Antipas, back in Revelation 2, was martyred in Pergamum for his Catholic faith. So it's kind of like I foresee there's come a time, maybe not too distant, when there are things that I want to say to you in Luke 21 that I don't want to get my head cut off, or worse, I don't want the message of the truth to be cut off. So we have a paywall, and I'll let you in on a secret. You can pay $1 and get into the paywall, but that's because we're going to use some code so that we can continue to speak truth as we are in an age where the power of the Antichrist is expanding, according to Pope Benedict XVI. And Revelation 13, it says in the first verse, I saw this beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit more of an elaboration on this in the next episode, but let me just tell you, this all comes from Daniel, particularly chapter 7. And chapter 7 is about the great kingship of the Messiah, Jesus Christ. And Daniel 7 says, I saw in my night visions, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and he sees these beasts come out of the sea, and finally this final beast, which had 10 horns. Revelation 13:1 says, the beast I saw rising out of the sea had 10 horns. I'm Steve Wood, your host, and you've been listening to Biblical Prophecy with Luke 21.
Luke 21 is a radio outreach of Family Life Center International. To learn more about biblical prophecy, visit us online at Luke21.com.